All right, sports fans, tonight we're going to do a quick unboxing of another static tank. Tonight, actually, we're doing one of our very favorite tanks. Both Adam and I were talking today at lunch, and we concurred that the Stug 3 has got to be one of our favorite tanks. We both like the way they looked. We both think they're really cool looking. But after we found out a year ago or so just how tough the little buggers are, we even like them better. So they've always been one of our favorite tanks. So tonight we're going to do an unboxing of a Forces of Valor Stug 3. So while I start doing the unboxing, Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about the specifications and maybe where they're used, or tell us what you know about Stug 3s.
Yeah, so the Stug 3 was, obviously, it's a German tank. It stands for Sturmgeschütz 3. It is based off of a Panzer III chassis. That's where it gets its number 3. It's actually the first in the Sturmgeschütz line. So don't get confused. It's not the third. It's Stug 3. It was designed by Alcat, the corporation. It weighs 23.9 tons, has a 12-cylinder gasoline engine with only 296 horsepower, which I think is crazy because I have a 6-cylinder engine in my car that has that many horsepower. So that's a little crazy.
You know, some guys think it's a sin for me to take a 20-year-old model out of the box. I'm trying to be as careful as possible, but how am I going to play with the darn things if I don't get them out of the box? Okay, so here we got our first look at our Stug 3. So we'll just start taking it out. You know, I really like these Forces of Valor models, Adam. I think they look like they're pretty well done as far as detail and everything that goes on with them, don't you think?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of experience with static models, but I think of the ones of the different companies that you have acquired them through, I think Forces of Valor definitely seems to be the highest quality.
Yeah, here's our Sturm. Let's take a good look at it close up. I think this thing's just wonderful. It's just the detail. The profile of these things are just really cool tanks, you know. Now we have to put a disclaimer here. These are murdering bastards. They could kill a lot of people and blow up a lot of tanks. But as far as, you know, just being a cool piece of equipment, these are really nice. All right. I think they're interesting how they establish the specs on these, Adam. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about that? The height and the stuff, you know?
Yeah, so from its inception, the Stug 3 was primarily a movable assault weapon to join with the infantry. It was never supposed to be much taller than a guy standing up. Its gun was primarily to bust bunkers and stuff. In World War I, the Germans realized that pillboxes or bunkers or buildings were quite trouble for infantry, as you might imagine. And so the idea of the Stug was envisioned. It has a 7.5 centimeter caliber artillery piece.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good tank. Now, you got to figure about when these were designed, were probably about 1936, 37, 38, and like Adam said earlier, they built these things off of a Panzer III chassis. And the Panzer III chassis were not very expensive in compared to some of the later tanks they're building. When they designed the Panzer and the Stugs, the tanks weren't that big. They put a lot of engineering and a lot of thought into them, but they wanted something they could mass produce and make a lot of them, which they lost sight of further in the war. But all throughout the war, the Stug was a very successful tank as far as being able to accomplish what they needed it to accomplish. The kill ratio on these were quite high. They were, like Adam mentioned earlier, they designed them specifically so they weren't any taller. Well, this one's a little bit taller than man. Maybe that's a short guy, but they didn't want a lot taller than a soldier, so soldiers could hide behind them. Plus, it made the profile very small from the front end. So, unlike the tanks with the turrets on them, they could hide behind windrows or hide behind the bushes pretty easy and hide. So they were kind of a stealthy. Okay, a minute ago we talked about the Stug 4. This is built off of the Panzer III chassis. You can tell that because it's a little bit, it's got the 6 road wheels instead of the 8. And the Panzer IV was a little bit bigger. Plus it had a little bit more powerful engine. And I think they had the same size gun, didn't they? The profile of the Stug 4, like reflecting in the profile of the Panzer IV, you got a higher deck back here, better access to the motors. And but other than that, you got 8 road wheels instead of 6. But I think weight-wise and everything else are about the same as far as size, mobility, and the firepower on them. So
one of the fascinating things about the Stug 3 is, as Doug mentioned, it was so successful. They originally designed it to be infantry support, as I mentioned, bunker busting, but it quickly became very versatile at blowing up other tanks. And
tank destroyers.
As a tank destroyer. And so it became essential to the war and the war effort. And when the United States entered the war, they blew up one of the factories that built the Stug 3. Well, that became a big problem because Hitler's war effort was very dependent on the Stug 3. Original developer of the Stug 3, because it had been blown up, wasn't able to make nearly as many as the war required. So the people who were at that point manufacturing Panzer IVs were recruited into making the Stug 4, which is the, as we mentioned before, the Stug 3 on a Panzer IV chassis. And that's why
Stug 4.
That's why you don't see a huge difference in the in how it's laid out from the Stug 3 to the Stug 4. Is they just took minor modifications from the Stug 3, took the top of it, laid it down on the Panzer IV chassis, made the little necessary adjustments to make that work, but they really were just trying to make what was already a very successful tank, just on a different chassis.
So what you're saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it?
Yes. And this is the one instance in which the Germans realized that.
Yeah. Now, some of the fun modifications they made on these Stugs is they made these side panels. And that was to take small arms fire and to keep not only the occupants safe inside, because the shell of the tanks were a lot thinner than the armor, of course, but also it helped protect the tracks, because the tracks are very vulnerable on all these tanks. If you ruin your tank, your tracks, you're kind of dead in the water, so to speak. So great tanks, very effective in World War II. As far as they're by far the most successful piece of mobile artillery that the Axis forces manufactured. And so based upon all of that, we thought it was really fun to highlight a Stug 3 and the Stug 4 tonight. The success of the Stug 3 enabled them, they started building like the Jag Panther, which we'll talk about later because it's off of the Panther frame. Then they made the Jag Tiger, all tank destroyers, but based upon the success they had on the Stug 3, which if they would have kept making the Stug 3, they'd been a lot better off than developing those bigger ones. The Jag Panthers were successful. They built a bunch of those, and they were scary mothers. But all right, I think that's it for now. Don't you? You got anything else you want to add, Adam?
No, that's it. I think just saying that the Stug 3 is one of our favorite tanks.
Yep. And as far as just Forces of Valor, model goes, they are really nicely detailed. Here's a picture of it with the sides on it and everything. I don't know if you can see it or not. There's the back picture with the sides on it and all that on there. And they're just really a detailed, well-built tank model. It comes with some busted down concrete walls. This one comes with the side panels on it, as you saw in the picture. Without further ado, yes, why you gentlemen weren't looking, or ladies, I did sneak several swigs of Diet Mountain Dew tonight. Subscribe, damn it. Bye.